Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some early Christian texts today.
Always exciting.
I think you'll find this one particularly interesting. The Letters of Ignatius. What do you make of these?
Oh, the Letters of Ignatius, a fascinating collection.
Yeah. And you know what's really cool is this collection, it's actually included alongside Caesar's Gallic Wars in this curriculum.
Really?
Yeah. For homeschoolers from Roman Roads Media. Kind of an interesting pairing, don't you think?
It is quite a juxtaposition. You have, on the one hand, Caesar chronicling military conquests, and on the other hand, you have Ignatius, a bishop in the early 2nd century, pouring out his heart and soul.
Yeah, it's almost like a modern-day Ignatius sending letters to spread the word.
In a way, yes.
So these letters, what I find so captivating about them is they offer us this glimpse into the very early days of Christianity.
I agree.
It's like holding a time capsule, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We get to see what was important to Christians back then.
Yes.
The challenges they faced and how they understood their faith in a world that was often hostile towards them.
Absolutely. A pivotal time for the burgeoning Christian movement. And Ignatius is writing. He's not just reflecting on these theological ideas, he's addressing real-life issues, controversies, and even persecution.
Oh, wow. So really getting into the nitty-gritty of what it meant to be a Christian back then.
Exactly.
Okay, well, so let's unpack this a bit.
Yeah.
Who was Ignatius and what makes his letter so special?
Well, Ignatius was the bishop of Antioch,
Okay.
which was a significant city in the Roman Empire. And what makes his letters so compelling is that he wrote them while he was literally on his way to Rome to be executed for his faith.
Oh, wow. Talk about writing with a sense of urgency, right?
Absolutely.
Knowing that your death is imminent.
Yeah.
You're facing a martyr's fate. That definitely adds another layer to these letters. And I'm guessing that probably influenced his message quite a bit, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. You can feel the weight of his situation in his words. He's passionate, sometimes even desperate in his pleas for unity within the church, his defense of core Christian beliefs, and his exhortations to persevere in the face of suffering.
He's really laying it all out there.
He is.
He's not holding back.
Not at all.
And he wasn't just writing to anyone, right?
Right.
Like, who were the recipients of these letters?
Primarily churches.
Okay.
In Asia Minor, what we would now call modern-day Turkey. He was basically using these letters to encourage, instruct, and warn his fellow Christians about the dangers they faced, both internally and externally.
So it sounds like he was really deeply concerned about the future of the church. I mean, why that level of concern?
Well, the early church didn't have the same kind of structure or authority that it developed later on.
Okay.
There were different interpretations of the faith, competing ideas about Jesus, and even outright heresies popping up.
Oh, so it was like the Wild West of Christianity, you know?
In a way, yes.
A lot of different ideas floating around, a lot of different interpretations. And he was trying to kind of, I don't know, rein it in a little bit, or at least like provide some guidance.
To provide some guidance, to correct what he saw as errors.
Yeah.
And to ensure the church was on a firm foundation.
So he felt this real need to unify the church, to bring everyone together on the same page, so to speak.
Exactly.
And this kind of brings us to his interesting nickname, Theophorus. What's the story behind that?
Ah, yes, Theophorus. It literally translates to God-bearer.
God-bearer. That's a pretty intense title.
It is.
Right.
A pretty intense title.
It definitely makes you wonder why he was called that.
Scholars debate the exact meaning, but it seems to reflect a couple of things.
Okay.
First, it points to Ignatius's deep devotion to Christ. He truly believed that Christ lived within him and that his purpose was to bear witness to God's presence in the world.
So to carry that sense of God within you, especially as you're facing, persecution and death, that's a pretty remarkable testament to his faith.
It is.
I mean, that's powerful.
And the nickname also connects to a key theme that runs throughout Ignatius's letters, the reality of Christ's incarnation.
And what exactly does that mean?
Well, back then, there were some groups, like the Docetae,
Okay.
who believed that Jesus only appeared to be human, that his suffering on the cross was just an illusion.
So for them, Jesus was more like a phantom, a spirit being,
Yes.
who couldn't actually experience physical pain or death.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
But Ignatius vehemently opposed this idea.
Right.
He insisted that Christ was both fully God and fully human, that he actually suffered and died for the sins of humanity. This was a central point for him because he saw the docetic beliefs as undermining the whole foundation of the Christian faith.
Yeah, it's almost like he's kind of anticipating these kinds of theological debates that would continue to pop up
Yeah.
throughout Christian history, right?
Absolutely.
Like this is a big one.
And this insistence on Christ's true humanity is deeply connected to another major theme in his letters:
Okay.
the importance of unity within the church. Ignatius saw these theological disputes as a real danger because they had the potential to divide the early Christians.
So it's like he's saying, look, we're already facing enough opposition from the outside world.
Yeah.
We can't afford to let internal disagreements tear us apart.
Exactly. And he goes on to explain that true unity is found in obedience to the bishop, in partaking of the Eucharist together, and in upholding the core teachings of the gospel.
So it's interesting to see how he kind of connects the theological and the practical.
Yes, that's
It's not just about believing the right thing. It's about living them out in community with other believers. And this reminds me of something else that stood out to me in the letters, was just the practical advice that Ignatius gives. It's not all just high theology and warnings about heresy.
Right.
He gets into some nitty-gritty details
He does.
about how Christians should behave in everyday life.
Right.
And that's what makes these letters so fascinating. For understanding the life of early Christians, we get these glimpses into their social norms, their struggles, and even their internal conflicts.
Oh, that's fascinating.
He talks about the proper conduct of widows, how slaves should be treated,
Oh, wow.
even how to handle disagreements within the community.
That's a gold mine of information for anyone who wants to understand what it was really like
It is.
to be a Christian in those early days.
And these practical instructions weren't just random thoughts. They were rooted in his understanding of the gospel. He saw these everyday actions as expressions of faith, as ways of living out the teachings of Christ in the real world.
So for him, being a Christian wasn't just about, going to church on Sunday.
Right.
It was about how you lived your life every single day. Yes, it was about embodying the love, compassion, and selflessness that he believed were at the heart of the Christian message.
It's fascinating how these themes kind of weave together, like his concern for unity, his defense of Christ's humanity, and then these practical pieces of advice he gives. It all seems very interconnected. It makes me wonder, like, how he would react to the state of Christianity today.
Now, that's a thought-provoking question.
It really is, and one we can explore a bit further. But before we move on, there's one quote that really struck me. In his letter to the Philadelphians, he writes, if I do not find it in the ancient scriptures, I will not believe the gospel. What do you make of that?
It highlights a crucial issue that was already emerging in the early church. The question of authority.
Right. Like what texts were considered authoritative?
Exactly.
How did the gospel message relate to the Hebrew scriptures? What do we call the Old Testament? These were questions that early Christians were already wrestling with.
Exactly. And this quote from Ignatius reviews that even in the 2nd century, there were debates about how to interpret Scripture and what role tradition should play in shaping Christian beliefs and practices.
It's mind-blowing to think that these debates have continued for centuries, and they're still relevant today,
It is, and I think it's important to acknowledge that the early church wasn't this monolithic, unified entity that we sometimes imagine.
Yeah.
There was a diversity of thought, theological disagreements, and different approaches to understanding the faith.
So even from the very beginning, there were different ways of being Christian.
Exactly. And that's something that I think is often overlooked or minimized when we talk about early church history.
Okay, wow. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
But I have a feeling there's so much more to explore.
Oh, absolutely. We've just scratched the surface of what these letters have to offer. But before we delve deeper, I'm curious to know what stands out to you so far. What has resonated with you the most from what we've discussed?
One thing that really strikes me is how Ignatius's writings, there's so much more than just dusty old documents from a bygone era.
Yes.
Like they're filled with this raw, this passionate energy that's almost contagious, wouldn't you say?
I completely agree. It's like you're listening to a man pouring out his heart, knowing that his time is short, and wanting to share everything he's learned about faith, about life, about the importance of standing firm in your convictions.
Powerful stuff.
It is.
And we'll delve deeper into that as we continue. It really is. Yeah. And last time we left off talking about how Ignatius was grappling with these really big questions about the nature of Christianity, questions about authority, the role of Scripture, how to stay true to those core teachings of the gospel in a world that was just full of different ideas and interpretations.
Exactly. And remember, he's writing these letters while being transported as a prisoner to Rome, facing almost certain death. Yeah. So for him, these aren't just abstract theological debates. Right. They're matters of life and death.
Yeah, absolutely. And this makes his emphasis on unity within the church all the more significant. He keeps hammering home this idea that Christians need to stick together, to be one body, especially when they're facing persecution, opposition from the outside world.
And it's fascinating how he ties this idea of unity back to the Eucharist, the communal meal, where Christians share bread and wine in remembrance of Christ's sacrifice. For Ignatius, this wasn't just a symbolic ritual. It was a tangible expression of their unity, a way of demonstrating that they were one body, united in Christ.
It makes you think about how divisions within a group can weaken it, especially when it's facing, opposition from the outside.
Absolutely.
And in the case of the early church, they were literally facing, life or death situations, standing together.
Yeah.
Meant survival, both physically and spiritually,
Absolutely. And you can see parallels to this throughout history, even in our own time.
Right.
Whenever a group is divided, whether it's a religious community, a political party, or even a family, it becomes vulnerable to outside forces.
Right.
Unity, on the other hand, creates strength, resilience, and a shared sense of purpose.
So in a way, Ignatius is offering us this kind of timeless lesson in the power of unity, a lesson that's as relevant today as it was back in the 2nd century.
I think so. And what makes his message even more compelling is that he's not just talking about unity in some abstract sense.
Right.
He's giving very specific instructions on how to achieve it. He stresses the importance of obeying the bishop, of avoiding those who spread false teachings, and of sticking to the core doctrines of the faith.
And this brings up another interesting point. While he's all about unity, he's also not afraid to call out those who he sees as leading people astray. He's got some pretty strong words for those who are teaching things that he believes are contrary to the gospel.
He does. He even uses the imagery of wolves in sheep's clothing.
Oh, wow.
To describe those who appear to be touching Christian doctrine, but are actually spreading false ideas that could harm the church. And this is where his deep concern for the historical reality of Christ's life, death, and resurrection comes into play.
Okay, let's dig into this a bit. What did he see as so dangerous about these alternative interpretations of Christianity?
For Ignatius, it all came down to the person of Jesus.
Okay.
If you get Jesus wrong, he argued, then you get everything wrong.
Okay.
And he saw some of these alternative teachings, like the Docetism we talked about earlier, as twisting the truth about Jesus and ultimately diminishing the power of the gospel.
I'm curious about this. Can you elaborate a bit more on what Docetism actually taught?
Sure.
And why it was so concerning to Ignatius?
Sure. Docetism comes from the Greek word doken, which means to seem or to appear. And it's a belief system that basically says that Jesus only appeared to be human. They believed that his physical body was just an illusion and that he didn't really suffer or die on the cross.
So it's they believed that God couldn't possibly take on human form and experience suffering in a physical way.
Exactly. And for Ignatius, this was a dangerous and heretical idea. He believed that Christ's physical incarnation, his real suffering on the cross, was absolutely essential to the Christian faith.
Go.
Without that, he argued, there's no real atonement for sin, no victory over death, no hope of resurrection.
So he saw this as striking at the very heart of the gospel message.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was adamant that Christians needed to be on guard against these kinds of distortions of the faith.
It's interesting to see how passionate he is about getting these theological details right. It wasn't just an intellectual exercise for him.
No.
It was about safeguarding the very essence of Christianity.
It was about truth.
Yeah. And what's really remarkable is that he's doing all of this while staring death in the face.
I know.
Knowing that he's about to be executed for his faith only seems to intensify his conviction
Hmm.
and his urgency
Yeah.
to get his message across.
Right.
I think that's what makes these letters so compelling. They're not just dry theological treatises.
Mm.
They're full of emotion, raw honesty, and this unwavering commitment to truth, even in the face of incredible adversity.
It's powerful.
It's almost like you could feel his energy like leaping off the page, even after all these centuries.
I agree. And this personal dimension is one of the things that makes Ignatius's letters so unique. They're not just abstract teachings. They're letters from a pastor to his flock, from a spiritual father to his children.
Yeah.
And you can sense the depth of his love and concern for them, even as he's challenging them to stand firm in their faith.
It makes you wonder what it would have been like to receive one of these letters back then.
Right.
Especially if you were, a Christian living in a hostile environment.
Imagine you're a believer in a small persecuted community, surrounded by people who don't understand your faith or who even see you as a threat. And then you receive this letter from a prominent leader like Ignatius, full of encouragement, guidance, and this passionate defense of the beliefs you hold dear. It would have been like a lifeline, a source of strength and hope in a world that often felt dark and dangerous.
It's almost like getting a letter from a spiritual mentor, someone who's been through the fire and come out the other side still holding on to their faith.
Exactly. And that's why these letters have resonated with Christians for centuries.
Right.
They offer a glimpse into the heart and mind of someone who lived out his faith with incredible courage and conviction, even in the face of death.
And while the world he lived in was vastly different from our own, I think there are some timeless lessons that we can glean from his writings.
Absolutely.
His emphasis on unity, his call for discernment in a world full of competing ideas, his unwavering belief in the power of the gospel. These are themes that still speak to us today, even across the span of almost 2,000 years.
And I have a feeling he has even more to teach us.
Oh, yeah.
About navigating the challenges of faith, especially in a world that can often feel hostile to those who hold traditional beliefs. But we'll have to save that for our next installment. Indeed. I'm looking forward to unpacking more of these timeless truths.
Yeah.
As we continue our deep dive into the letters of Ignatius.
As we wrap up our deep dive into these letters, into the letters of Ignatius, I'm struck by how much this early Christian leader had to say about the challenges of living out your faith in a world that doesn't always understand or accept your beliefs.
Absolutely.
It's like he was writing a playbook almost for navigating these complexities of faith.
I agree.
In a culture that often pushes back against it.
Yeah, and it speaks to the enduring relevance of Ignatius's message. He wasn't just addressing the issues of his own time. He was offering insights and principles that are applicable to believers in any age, including our own.
And remember, he's writing all of this.
I know.
While literally staring death in the face.
It's amazing.
He's a condemned man.
Yeah.
On his way to be executed for his faith.
It's remarkable.
And yet his letters are filled with this incredible sense of hope and resilience.
It's really remarkable, isn't it? You'd expect someone in his situation to be filled with despair or anger, but instead you see his letters radiating with this unshakable faith and a deep love for the church.
Yeah, it makes you wonder where he found that inner strength.
Right. Where did that come from?
Well, I think part of it comes from his unwavering belief in the power of the gospel. For Ignatius, the message of Christ's death and resurrection.
Right.
It wasn't just a nice story.
No.
It was the ultimate source of hope and meaning.
Exactly.
Even in the face of suffering and death.
And this connects to something we touched on earlier, his concern about false teachers and those who would distort the gospel message.
Yeah.
He uses this vivid metaphor of wolves in sheep's clothing to describe them.
Oh, wow.
Warning his readers to be on guard against those who appear to be spreading Christian teachings, but are actually leading people astray.
It's like he's saying, don't be fooled by appearances.
Yeah.
Just because someone sounds religious or claims to be a Christian doesn't mean they're they're actually aligned
Right.
with the truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
And this is where discernment comes in, right?
Absolutely. Ignatius recognized that in a world full of competing ideas and interpretations,
Right.
Christians needed to develop the ability to discern truth from error, to distinguish between genuine faith and counterfeit versions of it.
Yeah, and this is something I think we can all relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, wouldn't you say? We live in a world that's just...
We do. It's saturated with information.
Saturated with information.
So much coming at us all the time.
Yeah, and it's so hard to sift through it all.
Yes.
To figure out what's true, what's helpful, and what's ultimately going to lead us in the right direction.
I agree. It's a challenge. We're bombarded with messages from all sides.
Yeah.
From the media, from social media, from people we know and trust. Yeah. And it's easy to get caught up in the latest trends,
right,
or the most persuasive arguments,
right,
even if they're not aligned with our core values or beliefs.
So in a way, we're all facing our own versions.
We are.
Of those wolves in sheep's clothing that Ignatius warned about. Right. It might not be, literal wolves.
Yeah.
But there are definitely ideas, ideologies, and even individuals.
Absolutely.
that can lead us away from what we know to be true and good.
Yes. And that's why cultivating discernment is so crucial.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us who want to live out our faith in a world that often challenges our beliefs. And I think Ignatius offers some helpful guidance.
I'm all ears. What kind of guidance?
Okay. Well, first and foremost,
okay,
he emphasizes the importance of staying grounded in the core truths of the gospel.
Okay.
For him, this meant focusing on the historical reality of Christ's incarnation, death, and resurrection.
Yeah.
Those foundational beliefs that form the bedrock of the Christian faith.
So it's about keeping those essential truths front and center as a kind of measuring stick for evaluating everything else.
Exactly. And this doesn't mean that we can't engage with new ideas or explore different perspectives, but it does mean that we need to approach them with a critical eye. Yeah. Always asking ourselves, does this align with what I know to be true about God, about Jesus, and about the message of the gospel?
It's like having a filter
for
all the information that comes our way,
Right.
Making sure that it aligns.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's like having a spiritual filter.
Right.
That helps us sift through the noise and focus on what's truly important.
And what about community? We talked earlier about how Ignatius stressed the importance of unity within the church.
Right.
How does that play into this idea of developing discernment?
That's a great question.
Right.
Ignatius believed that we don't discern truth in isolation.
Okay.
We need the support, the guidance, and accountability of other believers to help us stay on track.
So it's about surrounding yourself with people who share your values, who can challenge you when you're veering off course.
Yes.
And who can encourage you to keep pursuing truth even when it's difficult.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that we don't have all the answers. Humility is a crucial part of discernment.
Right.
We need to be willing to listen to others, to consider different perspectives, and to admit when we might be wrong.
And I think that's a key takeaway.
I think so too.
From Ignatius's life and writings.
Yes.
He was a man of deep conviction.
Deep conviction.
But he was also humble enough to recognize that he needed the support and guidance of others.
Right.
To navigate these complexities
of faith in life. Yeah. And that's a powerful lesson for all of us, really.
Yeah.
Regardless of our religious beliefs or background.
Right.
We all need each other. We need community.
Yeah.
We need those who can help us discern truth, hold us accountable, and encourage us on the journey.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the letters of Ignatius, I have to say I'm amazed.
I am too.
By how much wisdom and insight can be found in these ancient texts.
They're so rich.
It's like they offer this timeless roadmap, for navigating the challenges of faith.
Yes.
Even in a world that can feel increasingly hostile.
Right.
To traditional beliefs.
I couldn't agree more. And his writings remind us that the essentials of faith haven't really changed all that much.
Right.
You know, the challenges of standing firm in your convictions,
Yeah.
of discerning truth from error,
Mm-hmm.
and of living out your beliefs in a culture that doesn't always understand or accept them.
Yeah.
These are issues that believers have grappled with
Right.
for centuries,
Oh.
and they're just as relevant today as
Yeah.
they were in the 2nd century.
And what I find particularly inspiring is that Ignatius faced those challenges with courage, with conviction,
He did.
and a deep love for the church.
Yes.
He didn't back down from his beliefs even when it cost him his life.
He did.
And that's a powerful testament
It is.
to the strength and resilience that can be found in genuine faith.
It really is. And as we navigate our own paths of faith in the 21st century, may we, like Ignatius, find the courage to stand firm in our convictions, to pursue truth with humility and discernment, and to live out our beliefs with love and compassion, even in a world that may not always understand or embrace them.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close.
That's good.
Thank you for joining us as we explored the letters of Ignatius together.
My pleasure.
We hope you've been as challenged and inspired by his story as we have.
Yes.
Until next time.
Right.
Keep seeking, keep questioning,
Yes.
and keep diving deep
Absolutely.
into the rich history of faith that surrounds us.